Hello brothers and sisters, welcome to another episode here on Dangerous African Confessions HD. In this episode, we have the continuation of the story from our brothers, who happens to have been led on the wrong path to Benin by his spiritual father in ministry. This is another story of manipulation, control, and the emotional journey of a young pastor wanting to find validation in the eyes of men, who finds himself trapped in a dangerous web of this sinister pastor. Without taking much of your time, let us now go into what our brother has for us today. I plead with you to please subscribe if you haven't done so, and also do like and share this video. Also hit the notification bell, so you will be notified anytime we upload videos.
The words were strange to my ears, but they felt like they were alive, each syllable vibrating through my body. I would call upon the spirits to lend me their power, to make me a vessel for their will. But the rituals weren't just about asking for power, they were about binding myself to them even more tightly. The more I gave, the more they would grant me. Sometimes, I would cut myself, drawing blood to offer to the spirits, whispering promises of loyalty in exchange for their favor. Yes, my brother, I am not kidding you. Other times, I would meditate, focusing on the dark energy that swirled around me, trying to attune myself to the forces I had now become part of. The room would grow heavy with energy, and I could feel the spirits whispering to me, guiding me, urging me to prepare for what was to come. By the time I finished the rituals, I would be drenched in sweat, my body humming with the power I had summoned. I felt invincible, like I could perform any miracle, deliver any prophecy, heal any sickness. And it worked, every time. When I walked into the sanctuary for the service, I felt the congregation's anticipation, and I knew I was ready. The first few services after my initiation were a revelation. The power I wielded was undeniable. I would step onto the stage, and instantly, I could feel the electricity in the air. People would look at me in awe, hanging on my every word, knowing that I was a man touched by something beyond the ordinary. I would deliver prophecies that were shockingly accurate, heal the sick with just a touch, and perform miracles that defied explanation. But the darkness I had embraced began to work its way into the hearts of my congregation. At first, it was subtle, small shifts in their behavior, an eagerness to please me, to seek my approval. Mostly that is how it works. When you see pastors, whose members are eager to please them and put them on high levels as if they are some divine beings themselves, you should be very careful with such pastors. And I can tell you without fear that, most of these pastors across the continent that people worship them as their spiritual fathers and all that, they have more darker powers than you can even imagine. They saw me as their spiritual leader, but in reality, I had become something more, a puppet of the dark forces, a conduit through which the spirits could influence them. They didn't know it yet, but the very power I had received came with a cost, and they would soon pay the price. You see, I will talk about the yearly rituals or sacrifices that I was doing to please the spirits. And it was something that I was doing at the expense of my congregation. As months passed, I began to notice a change in the people who came to my services. They were no longer seeking spiritual growth or a closer relationship with God. Instead, they came for the spectacle, for the miracles, for the blessings they could receive. But there was something darker growing within them. They would become obsessed with the power I wielded, constantly seeking more healing, more prophecy, more validation. They would begin to rely on me for everything, as if I were their God. What the Spirit does is that, for them, they see it to be normal and as such they don't find anything wrong with it. But in reality, they have substituted me to be their God. So, in reality, they are no more following the Savior or the God they think they are following. The more I performed miracles, the more they craved them. They wanted instant fixes to their problems, without understanding the cost. And I, too, became addicted to the power. It wasn't long before I realized that my congregation was not just following me, they were being controlled by the very same dark forces that controlled me. Please, before I continue with what I want to share, I want to plead with everyone that will be listening to me that, never should you seek solutions or submit to any pastor or leader without understanding where his power is from. Because, you may be doing your soul more harm than you think. As the months passed and I settled into my role as a powerful prophet, I began to realize that the dark forces I had aligned myself with were not content with just occasional offerings. The spirits I had pledged myself to demanded more blood, more devotion, more sacrifices. Every year, as the anniversary of my initiation drew near, I was required to perform a grand ritual, one that would solidify my bond with the spirits and ensure their continued favor. The rituals had become more complex, more intense, and more dangerous with each passing year. My senior prophet had warned me that this was the price of the power I had gained, that without these yearly rituals, the spirits could easily turn on me. But as I prepared to carry out these sacrifices, I could feel the darkness surrounding me grow stronger, as if the very air was thick with malice. The ritual was always set for the night of the anniversary of my initiation, the exact date when I had first made my pact with the spirits in Benin. I would retreat to my private altar room, the one no one else knew about, and begin preparing. There was an altar at the center of the room, draped in black cloth, surrounded by candles that flickered in the darkness like eyes watching me. The incense would burn thick, filling the room with an almost suffocating atmosphere. But the most important part of the ritual was the offering, the blood sacrifice. I had to sacrifice an animal, usually a goat or a chicken, and offer its blood to the spirits, just as I had done during my initiation. The animal's blood would be poured onto the altar, and I would chant the incantations that called upon the spirits to renew our bond. But the spirits demanded more than just an animal sacrifice. Each year, I had to offer something of myself, something personal. At first, it had been a small cut, a few drops of my own blood, but as time went on, the spirits grew more insistent. They required deeper sacrifices. They needed to feel my pain, to taste my fear. So, I would carve symbols into my own flesh, each one a sign of my commitment, a payment for the power I continued to wield. The pain would be excruciating, but I had grown used to it. In fact, I had come to crave it. It was as if the spirits were feeding off my suffering, and the more I gave, the more powerful I became. But with each passing year, the rituals became more dangerous, and the toll on my body became more severe. Yes, my brother, I have done it all. And to tell you something that would eventually put me in a certain state of awareness was that year. The year that nearly claimed my life began like any other. The spirits demanded a grander offering, a life for a life. My senior prophet had prepared me for this, telling me that the spirits would sometimes require human sacrifice to solidify the bond. I had always feared this moment, but the power I had gained over the years had made me more willing to do anything to keep the spirits satisfied. The need to protect my position, my congregation, and my newfound influence outweighed any moral reservations I had left. I spent weeks planning the sacrifice, carefully selecting a victim from my congregation, someone who had become overly devoted, a person who had grown too close to me, too reliant on my power. They had become an instrument of the spirits without even realizing it. I saw it as a necessary step, a way to appease the spirits and ensure that the power I wielded would remain strong. On the night of the ritual, I led this individual to my private altar room by way of summoning his spirit into the animal I was going to use. So, whatever I was going to do to the animal was going to affect the person in real life. I could feel the weight of the spirits in the air, their presence so oppressive that it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I performed the ritual just as I had done in years past, setting up the altar, lighting the candles, chanting the ancient words, and preparing the knife for the sacrifice. But as the blood of the victim spilled onto the altar, something went terribly wrong. As the blood began to pool on the ground, I could feel the spirits becoming restless. The air grew colder, the flames of the candles flickering violently. The chanting grew louder in my ears, their demands becoming more insistent. But this year, the ritual did not bring the satisfaction I had come to expect. Instead, it felt as though the spirits were turning on me. The dark power I had once controlled seemed to slip from my grasp, as if the very forces I had summoned were now pushing me away. I fell to my knees, the weight of the ritual overwhelming me. The room spun, and I felt as though the darkness was consuming me from the inside out. My heart raced, my body shook, and the air became thick with a presence I could not control. It was as though the spirits were no longer interested in offering their power, they were taking it back, and in doing so, they were draining me of everything I had gained. I gasped for breath as the world around me became a blur of shadows and darkness. I could feel the life being sucked out of me, as though every breath I took was my last. The ritual had taken a toll on my body before, but this was different. This wasn't just physical pain, it was spiritual agony. I was no longer a servant of the spirits, I was a victim, and they were feeding on me like a parasite, consuming everything I had to offer. In that moment, I truly feared for my life. I had crossed a line I could never come back from. That moment, I knew that the power I had so eagerly sought was now my prison. The darkness that I had once controlled had now turned on me, and I was powerless to stop it. I screamed out, pleading for the spirits to spare me, to show mercy, but there was no answer. The room was silent, save for the faint whispering of the spirits, which only seemed to grow louder and more mocking. Just as I felt my consciousness slipping away, I thought of the prophet. He had warned me of the price of power, but I had never fully understood it until now. I had become too confident, too complacent in my control over the dark forces. But the spirits, I realized, would never be fully controlled. They were ancient, primal forces, and I was nothing more than a pawn in their game. Somehow, I survived that night, but barely. When I awoke, I was lying on the floor of my altar room, surrounded by the remnants of the ritual. The blood of the sacrifice had dried, the candles had burned out, and the air was still. But I felt weak, drained, as though every ounce of strength had been siphoned away. It took me days to recover from the physical toll, and even longer to come to terms with the fact that I had almost died in the very room I had used to summon power. The spirits had shown me their true nature. They were not benevolent gods who granted power freely, they were ancient, parasitic entities that consumed everything in their path. And in exchange for the power they had given me, I had nearly lost my life. The darkness I had embraced was not just a force I could use, it was a force that demanded everything from me. Every year, the rituals would grow more demanding, more dangerous. But now, I understood the full cost of the power I had sought. I had given my soul to the spirits, and they had taken their due. I knew then that there was no escaping them. The pact I had made was irreversible. The darkness would always be with me, always demanding more, until there was nothing left. As the power I wielded deepened, so too did the negative influence it had on my congregation. Some of them began to experience strange dreams, nightmares filled with dark figures and shadowy figures whispering in their ears. They would come to me, seeking answers, but I couldn't give them what they truly needed. I could offer them prophecies, but none of them brought peace. Instead, the prophecies created fear, fear of the future, fear of what was to come. And one thing, which is the most important thing for you to take with you in this conversation, is that when you go to church and there is fear of someone working on you in the realm of the spirit. Like they will say, someone is working in the spirit against you like witchcraft and all those things, know that it is the work of the archons. They always feed on the negative frequencies, which is fear. More you are being told this is doing you and that person or spirit is working against you, you will continue to subject yourself to the fear. And thereby you not able to rise in the spirit realm as you should. Some of my members would become more obsessive, their personalities shifting as they sought more power and recognition. There was a growing sense of unease within the congregation, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. People would fight over positions of influence within the church, argue over who had received the most blessings, who had the most powerful visions. The unity that had once defined our fellowship was disintegrating, replaced by jealousy and division. The sick who came to me for healing were sometimes cured, but not without consequences. Those who were healed often found themselves addicted to the power I had given them, becoming dependent on my touch and losing their own connection to God. They would come back again and again, asking for more, never satisfied. Some would even begin to act erratically, driven by an unseen force, as though they were no longer in control of their own bodies. Even more troubling were the spiritual attacks that began to happen. As I grew stronger, so too did the forces I had aligned myself with. My congregation was slowly being torn apart, not by external forces, but by the darkness within. People who had once been kind-hearted, loving Christians were now consumed by greed, lust, and pride. They would gossip about one another, spread rumors, and engage in sinful behaviors that were foreign to their nature. It was as if the spirits I had called upon had seeped into their souls, twisting them into something unrecognizable. I could feel the weight of the spirits growing stronger, more demanding. The more I gave in to their will, the more my congregation descended into chaos. The very people I had once hoped to help were now being destroyed by the power I had embraced. One evening, after a particularly harrowing service, I found myself alone in my private altar room. I had just healed a woman of a terminal illness, and yet, something in her eyes had unsettled me. It was as though the healing had not been a blessing, but a curse. As I stood before the altar, surrounded by the dark symbols, I finally understood the full extent of what I had done. The power I had gained came with a terrible price, one I had not fully understood until now. The darkness I had invited into my life had taken root in the lives of my congregation. I had sought power, fame, and miracles, but at what cost? I had sacrificed my own soul, and now, I had dragged countless others down with me. As I looked at the altar, I wondered if there was any way to break free. But deep down, I knew the truth. The spirits I had made my pact with would not let me go easily. And neither would my congregation. They were bound to me, as I was bound to them. We were all tangled in the same web, trapped in a darkness that none of us could escape. And that is the reason why when you first contacted me, I told you I was no longer in ministry like I used to. I deliberately traveled and spent time outside, and by so doing the people I left the church for couldn't sustain the church. Simply because whatever was sustaining the congregation was right with me. And so, the church collapsed. Although I have been battling this power, I have sought for all these whiles. I know I will one day have to face the last end of me. That is why I wanted to share for someone to really understand what goes on in the ministry. Especially the prophetic and healing ministry. Today, I am a man who has been consumed by darkness. My heart is heavy with regret. I can no longer hide from the truth. Everything I preached, everything I did, was a lie. The healings, the prophecies, the miracles, they were all nothing more than illusions, tricks of the devil. I took part in this great deception, and I brought others down the same path. The weight of my actions has broken me. The luxury, the fame, the power, it all meant nothing when I realized I had lost my soul. I have betrayed the very God I once promised to serve, and now I stand here, asking for forgiveness. If you are watching this, I urge you to listen to me. The path to power is not through the dark. Do not let the promise of riches and influence blind you. Do not follow the lies of those who would lead you astray. The cost is too high, and there is no return once you step into the darkness. Please, do not make the same mistake I did.
Don't forget to please subscribe, share and like our videos. Kindly hit the notification bell so you will be the first to get notification to our videos when we upload. His story centers on first the trust the senior pastor managed to get from him. And that is how they operate. They will first sell you things that will make you trust them, before they start with their sinister plans. You see, the connection is built on trust, mentorship, and the promise of greater things, which sets the stage for the eventual initiation into the dark side. This man's story is filled with regret, and emotional depth, and the power of control which took him on the tragic journey into the dark world of forbidden power. What he said, when as a church member you are influenced by what they do, the influence of the spirits distorts you the once innocent person, thereby leading you into chaos and spiritual ruin. I want to say today too that, faith is a beautiful thing. It can lift us up in our darkest moments and guide us when we feel lost. But faith, when placed in the wrong hands, can also be a weapon, one that can destroy you. We don't do this work to condemn the church or to tell you not to believe. No, that is not why we do this work. All that we want you to know or hear is to be careful. Be vigilant. Not everyone who stands behind a pulpit is a servant of God. Not everyone who calls themselves a prophet or a pastor is truly anointed. Some of these so-called men of God are nothing more than wolves in sheep's clothing. They use the name of God to manipulate, to control, and to take. They preach about blessings while living in luxury built on the sacrifices of people like you and I. I beg you, brothers and sisters, ask questions. Pray for discernment. Test the spirits, as the Bible says. Do not let anyone guilt you into giving beyond your means or participating in things that feel wrong in your spirit. Just like I always say, my heart aches for those who place their trust in men, believing they are receiving blessings from above when, in truth, they are entangled in a web of darkness. I hope that this will be a lesson etched in the hearts of those who dare to tread the fine line between faith and fanaticism. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And always question the source of power before you place your trust in it. This platform is for us to learn that not everything that claims to be light is light. Be careful where you place your trust. And also seek to associate yourself with genuine people of light. If you've ever been in a similar situation, or if you feel something's not right in your church or community, leave a comment below. Let's talk about it. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more true stories, because sometimes, the scariest things aren't the ones we see, they're the ones we don't.